Okay, members, good afternoon. As we're only quoted for taking evidence and not decision-making, I'm proposing we go to agenda item 9 to begin today, and that is a briefing with regard to Stephen Agnew's Private Members Bill on Children's Services Cooperation. This will be the first of our evidence sessions. Clause 4 of the bill places a particular duty on the Health and Social Care Board due to its governance of the Children and Young People's Strategic Partnership. We are about to hear evidence from two members from the board. In terms of briefing papers, members, a cover note from the clerk is at page 87 of your pack, and there's quite a number of other relevant papers. Page 91, the Children's Services Cooperation Bill is introduced to the House on the 8th of December. Page 98 is the explanatory and financial memorandum. Page 104 reveals the technical briefing note from Daniel Greenberg. Page 109 is a briefing paper on the bill from Assembly Research. Page 123 is a submission from the Health and Social Care Board with regard to the bill. Page 129 is the guidance which currently covers children's services planning in Northern Ireland. An updated version of this guidance is available in table papers at page 46. And finally, in the main packet, page 161, is the executive summary of the last Children and Young People's Plan for Northern Ireland, covering 2011 to 2014. And if members would wish to see the full report, please ask committee staff. So, a lot of background papers, members, and two gentlemen joining us today. Tony Rogers, who's Assistant Director of Social Care, and Maurice Leeson, who's the Children's Services Planning Professional Advisor on the Health and Social Care Board. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Can I invite you to make some opening remarks?
Certainly, Chair. What I'd like to do is maybe just make some remarks based on the paper that was submitted. First of all, we're very pleased to be here to address you. As you know from the papers, the Health and Social Care Board convenes the multi-agency Children and Young People's Strategic Partnership, which supports the development and implementation of the current Children's Services Plan. You've made reference there to the fact that in the papers there is a setting out of the current situation. The Children 1995 Order, Children's Services Planning Act 1998 requires the Health and Social Care Board to produce a Children's Services Plan. So we currently have responsibility to produce a plan. And in preparing or updating that plan, we have a responsibility, a duty within the Health and Social Care Board to consult widely around the trusts, education, library boards, district councils, voluntary organisations, housing executive, probation board, police and other relevant departments. The actual guidance to the order, which was published in July 1998, identifies a range of purposes in terms of that plan, many of which would appear to be quite consistent with what's been proposed in terms of the current Private Members Bill, which includes, for example, establishing a high standard of coordination and collaboration between health and social service boards and trusts and other agencies and organisations which have a contribution to make to the effective provision of local services. So currently there's no statutory duty to cooperate, but there is a requirement in Health and Social Care Board to produce the Children's Services Plan and to consult very widely on the content. In general terms, the Health and Social Care Board is very supportive of the principles behind the proposed legislation, and many of the parts of that legislation are reflected in the current Children and Young People's Strategic Service Plan. We do realise that there needs to be further consideration, particularly around the Clause 4 and the proposed amendments to the Children Northern Ireland Order. We are aware of some examples, some concerns that have been raised, but in general terms we would be supportive in terms of what's been proposed.
Okay. No, that's good. Okay, thank you very much, Maurice. Thank you. So, am I hearing you saying that you're supportive of it, and effectively it is largely what you already do, but it would just simply give it a further statutory effect?
There are quite a number of the parts of the proposed bill are in fact things that already do happen. As I say, in particular I would say that we already produce a Children's Services Plan. It is reviewed on an annual basis. The guidance would suggest that the plan should be produced every 3 years. We are required to consult widely with a wide range of organisations, many of whom are, well, those are also identified within the bill. We do already convene, as I say, the Children and Young People Strategic Partnership in order to consider what the issues are. So yes, many of the things that are being proposed are already there, but obviously one of the critical differences is the statutory duty to cooperate.
I think looking at the proposed bill the first time, some members naturally had a kind of instinctive concern that it perhaps was onerous in terms of the additional duties, particularly in terms of paperwork that it would place upon your board. Is that unfounded?
Certainly. We already produce a plan, so in terms of actually producing a children's services plan, that's not an additional issue. And as I've said, we already do complete annual reviews. We do convene the partnership in order to facilitate the consultation with a wide range of agencies. We do report on the outcomes of our activities. So generally speaking, from our point of view, from the Health and Social Care Board, it's not adding significantly to what we already do through the Children's Services Planning Order.
So if this... Sorry,
I was just going to say that I think the construct of the plan, there may be some additional emphasis or it may change in some ways, and I think we would want to give further consideration to that as this bill is progressing and to look at what the implications might be, because I think that it might take a different shape and that might have some additional implications for us. I think, as Maurice says, we are doing a lot of the work at the minute, but we feel that there may be some changes that we want to give consideration to. I suppose that what the proposed legislation does is really give it an increased impetus. It gives it increased focus, and probably, if I'm honest, in terms of a statutory duty, really places an obligation on everyone then to give it more serious consideration and perhaps more serious investment in terms of their time, energy and ultimately funding.
That's what I'm trying to tease out. If this becomes law in its current form or in the form that we perhaps see it evolving into, does it have resource implications for your board? Specifically, do you see a situation where you would be asking for additional resource and funding?
There may be some. I think it's difficult for us to quantify at this stage, but there may be some additional implication, yes. But I think that it's whether some of that is offset by, because of, I think it's also clear that there are potential efficiencies within this in terms of the nature of the plan, who subscribes to the plan, how that's reflected in other agencies and departments. So there are clearly efficiencies, and whether one offsets the other. I think our view ultimately would be that there are some efficiencies. As I say, then it comes in terms of, because there's reference made to pool budgets, there's reference made to other agencies and departments who contribute in kind. So it's how that support can be provided.
Okay, I get it. I am asking how long is a piece of string to an extent, but you wouldn't anticipate at the end of this process saying we need additional staff measured in double digits or hundreds of thousands of pounds? No really significant resource implications. Okay. Tell me about your engagement, or the engagement you have had from the bill sponsor to date.
We have met with Stephen Agnew and discussed the intent behind the bill, and we did share with him our initial views and did submit a paper to him which just described how we felt the legislation could potentially impact on the work that we do.
Are you satisfied with the engagement?
Yes, we were satisfied with the engagement, yes, and he was able to answer some of the questions that we had in terms of what was being proposed.
Do you think you need further engagement with Stephen as we go towards?
I mean, I think, as Tony says, as this process develops, because obviously the committee will take other evidence as well, and as the bill begins to shape up, I am quite sure that we will need to have engagement with a number of people in terms of what's happening.
And your primary relationship in terms of our interest today is between yourselves and the Children and Young People Strategic Partnership. Can you tell us first of all about the CYPSP?
Well, the CYPSP was set up 4 years ago, and it was set up to be a regional forum for chief executives of organisations concerned with the well-being of children and young people. So its membership will include the chief executives of the trusts, senior members from some of the councils, from Solus, from police, probation, Youth Justice Agency, And the idea being to create one place where there could be a singular senior management focus on issues affecting children. It was chosen to have one body covering all of Northern Ireland because previously, before the Review of Public Administration, there were 4 Children and Young People's Committees in each of the board areas. The guidance to the Children's Services Plan and legislation requires us to set up a body that will enable us to develop the plan. So whenever, after RPA, it was determined that the most efficient way to do that was to have one body covering all of Northern Ireland. But the intention is to promote, and the aim is to promote integrated planning and commissioning and greater levels of cooperation amongst all the organisations involved with children and young people.
From what you're saying, it is a group that only reflects statutory bodies?
No, sorry, I should really have been clarified that. It also includes voluntary and community organisations. We have places on the CYPSB for 3 voluntary organisations, 3 community organisations, and 3 organisations that represent the interests of the BME community. We fill those places by advertising and encouraging organisations to apply. We also have a number of other groups. There's this whole structure behind that. I'm not sure to what extent you'd like me to go into that. But for example, we have 5 outcomes groups at each of the trust levels that brings together senior members of staff with voluntary community organisations to look at how best to work together to promote outcomes in particular areas. And again, you know, as I say, there's a wide representation there.
I'm asking because I'm interested in the extent to which you're achieving kind of joined-up government, which is something of a holy grail. But it seems to me this is perhaps a model that is well worth looking at as an effective means of engagement.
Yes, we feel so, and we feel that, as I say, we have been able to bring together quite a wide selection of people. As I say, there is a wider structure behind it because inevitably, when you set up a process and there's one body, the other parts of the structure are intended to reflect much more of a bottom-up aspect to the planning process, and also to see that we can engage as wide a range of people as possible in the delivery of services.
How would you characterise your relationship then with the partnership?
My relationship, well,
the board's
relationship. Well, the board chairs the partnership, and people like myself do support the partnership. So clearly, it's a very constructive relationship, and the intention behind that is, as I say, to assist in the duty we do have to produce a children's services plan.
There have been some concerns raised that if this bill were to go through in current form, that it would actually confer a significant amount of power on the Health and Social Care Board, perhaps too much power. Would you have a view on that?
I don't think we would necessarily see it like that. I can understand how that might be viewed, but I suppose in terms of both how the partnership has worked to date and how we would envisage it in the future has been very much about collaboration. As I'm repeating myself, but I suppose in terms of the proposed legislation is about giving it that greater focus, direction and impetus. I think that probably the challenge, if we're frank, in terms of to date has been there's been very positive relationships within the partnership and probably significant sign-up to the overall strategic direction, but it probably hasn't moved as far as we like on the basis of just what the ultimate vision is, and moving that step further, particularly around the concept of pool budgets in terms of whatever machination that might have, whether that's in terms of money or in kind, and us all signing up to that and forging forward in a similar direction. That's what I was referring to earlier in terms of the increased efficiency, some of the streamlining. And really, I think that probably for all of us, and I'm including the board within this, I think at times we have a preoccupation with the brand in terms of our own brand, as opposed to a brand which is about strategic planning and strategic direction, which is ultimately in the best interests of children. And if we can crack that, then I think we will make considerable investment and progress.
How do you do that?
Well, I suppose that's the issue in terms of that the subscribing to where this is going in terms of a statutory duty to cooperate moves us a step further. It increases the emphasis in terms of the monitoring, the sign-up, and perhaps in terms of promoting that sense of a shared governance and a shared sense of ownership, and then the reporting mechanisms. Because I think with that, there's the potential then that, as I say, we can move it a step further, and that the progress that perhaps has been stilted at times will be much greater.
Now, the CYPSP has statutory duties, yeah?
The CYPSP is not a legally constituted body. It doesn't have any legal form. It's a partnership. There is a statutory responsibility on the Health and Social Care Board to produce a children's services plan and to consult with the range of agencies I referred to in terms of the development of that plan. So there is responsibility on us to produce a plan.
The CYPSP has a statutory origin. It's formed under statute, but there's not a requirement in terms of a statutory duty to cooperate. Right. The board has an obligation in terms of the forming of the partnership and the chairing of the partnership.
Okay. In terms of pooling funds, I think under the integrated commissioning, the CYPSP plan states that the partnership has decided to collaborate in the use of funds that come to the individual statutory agencies who are on the CYPSP, so that we can use our funding and resources better together than apart. How does that work in practice?
I think it's fair to say that is a very difficult journey that we're on, and that is the aspiration that the partnership has. We have been. There are examples where we've been able to put pots of money together from different organisations in order to commission services that possibly, that previously would have been commissioned by a single agency. But the vision of actually creating a wider sense of a shared pot is one that we're still working towards. We very much focus currently at the moment with our outcomes groups around getting organisations to sit down and be clear with each other about what their individual priorities are, what their individual plans are for the year ahead, and to begin to actively look and see whether or not there is potential within that for people to do things more together. But in fairness, the answer to your question is that it is a difficult journey that we're on. And as I say, whilst there have been occasions when we've been able to do that around individual issues, in terms of a general sense of pooled budgets, we're not there yet.
Maybe the most important thing you're saying there, Maurice, is that it's a journey. And does that indicate to me that it's a hearts and minds battle, that you're trying to convince people of the benefits of sharing?
I think that people are convinced of the benefits. I just think that it can be difficult sometimes to reconcile the individual responsibilities of agencies through to their individual departments with a collective sense of this is what we should all be doing. I think that does present a challenge, and one that we've been working our way through.
So when we look at Stephen's bill and this provision for the pooling of resources by executive departments,
yes,
are there lessons we can read across from your experience?
Certainly we would be very supportive of the idea. I mean, certainly the feedback we get, for example, from many of our partners in the volunteering community sector is that very often for them that they are working to put together, if you like, a number of funders in order to create one service, and certainly they would. A lot of the feedback we get would be, look, it would be easier for us in terms of seeing more money directed to the front line and seeing if statutory budgets were pulled more often, and therefore they were making one application for money to deliver a particular priority as opposed to several applications to different statutory organisations in order to do something. So we would certainly be very supportive, yes, of the approach that's being concerned, and certainly through the early intervention transformation programme, we've seen one example of where departments have put money together in order to deliver some of that.
Again, looking at the children and young people's plan for 11 to 14, which members on your packs, page 171, it says that the current lack of coordination means much time and energy is wasted, so we aim to improve coordination both locally and for particular groups of children and young people. Can you give us some examples of how a lack of coordination has arisen and how you've tackled and improved it?
Well, certainly the way we tackled and improved it as in terms of the outcomes groups has been around the creation of a space in which the various organisations can come together in order to share what their individual priorities are. And that's very much been how we have conceived of that, is to say that at that level there needs to be a space in which those discussions take place where I can say this is what a priority for us going forward is, where a dialogue can be had then with representatives of many of the provider organisations coming from the volunteering community and other statutory sectors in terms of giving feedback to what that is. But when I described the journey earlier on, really what I was saying, that part of it around, well, let's sit down and be very clear with each other about what we're doing and search within that for the potential to work together. I mean, that, I think, has been the big gain to date. And I think that the next logical step for us is to take it on into, having got that kind of working side by side sorted out, is to move on then to say, well, look, can we begin now to take the next step, which is around pooling budgets and working more closely that way.
Do you think that is the most kind of radical proposal within the bill?
I think it's certainly a very challenging proposal within the bill. I think that whilst I wouldn't profess to be an expert in these matters, I mean, certainly in terms of accountability and in terms of the accountability for funding, I mean, one of the things we did look at very early on in CYPSP is how do you create a shared budget in which you satisfy the quite correct expectations of a range of agencies in terms of how the money is managed. So we did look at, and we have developed a kind of model around, appointing one organisation becoming the lead, and then that organisation exercising the accountability on behalf of others. So it is a challenging process and quite different to what we've been doing up until now.
You've indicated that further consideration would be needed on the proposed amendments to the Children's Northern Ireland Order of 1995 to ensure the intent behind this proposed legislation is reflected in its enactment. Can you expand on that? What needs to happen?
Certainly, I mean, as we haven't spoken to Stephen, his intent really was to put the CYPSP on a statutory footing. The vehicle chosen to do that was through an amendment to the Children Order. And one of the things that we wanted to look more closely at was that the fit between what was being proposed and whether that would fit in with the Children's Order. And we think we would need to just give a little bit more thought to how that would work. I mean, the Children's Order is very much focused on children in need. As we understand, the proposed bill is looking at all children.
Yes.
And it's really just about, not saying it's impossible, but it was just really a note of caution on our part that we just needed to be absolutely clear that the two things would fit well together.
I based many of my questions on your submission. This Northern
Yes.
Ireland Children and Young
Yep.
was planned for 11 to 14.
Yes.
Well, of course, now we're in 2015. Is there going to be a plan for?
Yes, so we have. We're currently in the process and have a first draft of a plan which was shared with CYPSP last time it met. So yes, we're in the process of developing that.
And what period would that be designed to cover?
Well, one of the things that the guidance to the legislation encourages us to do is to try and dovetail the children's services planning cycle with other planning cycles. And we would like to move the Children's Services Plan more in line with the Comprehensive Spending Review and the Programme for Government, because our members have been reflecting to us that it was very difficult for them to agree a set of priorities and then maybe the following year there would be a programme for government that might request us to do something different. So we would be looking at another 3-year plan, but our intention would be to do a more substantive version to bring it in whenever the new programme for government, new comprehensive spending review cycle. So my answer is yes, I'm doing a 3-year one, but I'm conscious of the fact that I would like to move to a position in which it's more closely following the...
So there will be a hiatus between the last one and the next one, but for logical, argued, evidenced reasons?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Has the 11 to 14 plan been reviewed, monitored, evaluated?
Yes, we've just finished the review, and again, the report was shared with CYPSP at its last meeting. So yeah, we've just.
Okay, thank you very much. Bronwyn McGann.
Thank you, Chair. The Children's Services Planning Guidance, how old is that document?
It's 1998.
No, because, like, for example, you know, when you're referring to statutory agencies under collaboration, it's the RUC, not the PSNA.
Yeah.
You know, so it's quite old.
It is, yes.
So when will that be updated? Sorry.
Well, I have no detail of any plans to update it. As I say, it is the guidance. It's not part of the legislation. Obviously, it's the guidance that goes with it. And what we have done really is to clearly to reflect the fact that some aspects of it, some of the descriptions of bodies are yes out of date. But you know, obviously, we've worked to amend that in our own documentation.
Alex Maskey.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation so far. A couple of wee things, just in a way I'm a wee bit not confused, but there seems to be like two aspects of the proposals in the bill. I think everybody so far has expressed their fairly general agreement with the you know, the intention behind it. Question about that. I'm pleased to hear the way in which you've described some of the constructive engagement that you already have under the current arrangements. But on the one hand, it seems to be with the bill that it's doing a lot of the things that is already being done, and there's no additional outcomes. I mean, to do reports doesn't tell you on what basis to do a report, doesn't add any, in my opinion, doesn't add great value as to what might be in those reports. So to that extent, it looks for greater monitoring and reporting, but doesn't actually make differences to what the outcome might be. But then on the other hand, it seems to suggest ceding more authority to an arm's-length body to develop plans. So, in a way in which I can't remember the exact phrase, but it was around, you know, your board might actually would have then the power to elaborate and modify, change the plan in a period of time. So, what would you say the parameters of that? Because that obviously does bring in the possible contention with executive departments, for example, who do have statutory authority to say there's their responsibility. Why would they cede authority to what in effect is an arm's length body?
I mean, certainly that we would see the plan as being a shared plan, a plan that was developed by the agencies, not as a health and social care plan. And in fact, again, our current guidance emphasises the fact that in the production of a children's services plan currently, that it should be a shared plan and not a health and social care board plan that everybody else agrees to. And certainly in our reading of the legislation, we do feel that what's being proposed equally is a shared plan. We accept that there may be drafting issues there in terms of possibly, you know, creating a situation that you've described, but our own view would be that I mean, this is a shared plan, that organisations agree, you know, that there are priorities. We agree on those, and we agree on what needs to be done in terms of delivering that. And we think that one of the things as well that the legislation potentially does very clearly is set out an expectation in terms of you expect of us that we cooperate and collaborate to the fullest extent we can to deliver priorities. And I think that it does indeed begin to, as I say, set some clear expectations in terms of what's expected.
I think it'll also clearly, in terms of this process, it'll be within the parameters of the legislation how much authority is or is not vested in the Health and Social Care Board. You know, you can modify
this
yes,
is the proposed.
yes, you can modify that in some way in terms of if that's an issue of concern. I think, as Morris said, and as I referred to earlier, we do see this as being, and it has always been very much about a collaboration, but there is something about a statutory intent giving that greater drive and greater impetus in terms of trying to get us to a different place from where we are at the minute. Because there's no doubt that at different times we come either with different agendas, sometimes vested agendas, sometimes different priorities, and that this will allow us to have and really give us an impetus to have greater focus on the shared vision for children, on what it is that we're collectively signing up to for children, and that we commit to, both in terms of whether it's in kind or in terms of resource, and that then we all understand how that's going to be monitored and what part we all play in it.
See, I've just been devil's advocate because I mean I wouldn't have made my mind up on this at all, because I said earlier on, certainly very much sure the and everybody's on the same wavelength. But I just wondered if we were to cede further authority in this bill, could that possibly, I know you can't really answer this, I'm just trying to tease this out my own mind, could that have the effect of some of the agencies or departments saying, well, you know what, to say this is going to become a bit of a negotiation place for resources and one thing and another, I'm going to put such and such a body on that body, if you know what I mean, just trying to think out loud. If you make, because if I want to cooperate, I'll cooperate. If it becomes a platform for negotiating something, I may decide to send somebody else. If you know what I mean. So I'm wondering, could that impact on the free cooperation that you're expressing there, which we're very encouraged to hear?
I don't think so, in the sense that I think that one of the positive things it does is it does lay down that clear expectation of us that this is what's expected, that in current climate, with all the difficulties we face and challenges we face, that there's an expectation that we work together to the fullest possible extent of our different mandates in order to deliver good outcomes for children. I understand your point, and I suppose go back to my own view, is that really the advantage of this is around a shared vision, as opposed to something in which people are feeling that they're being shoehorned into an arrangement is not really going to work for them. And our experience to date has been that we can deliver that shared vision. But as I say, the sense in which this is describing what's expected of us is helpful.
Okay, well, listen, thank you both very much. That's been very useful.
All right. I apologise that I was a wee bit late, so I missed some of your... My own view is that that the best way to create certainty and avoid doubt is to create statutory obligations. And I think our society demonstrates over many years that it is only when you create statutory obligations in relation to equality or rights or whatever it might be, that becomes the vehicle to drive change and maximise outcomes. So that's the general perspective I bring to these sort of issues, and that's why I think this bill is the right approach, not least given the scale of child poverty and given the scale of other risks that children face. And a lot of evidence of that even in the last 24 hours in other places. But I just want to make sure, are you both on the same page when it comes to this? Because I got the sense from Morris that it was, this is what we're doing already, whereas the language from you, Tony, seemed to be somewhat more elaborate, increased focus, catalyst, more time, energy, and potentially on the far side of all of that, more funding.
I think we want to be clear that a lot of the work that's progressing at the present is very positive. I think what I'm articulating is a view that more could be done, and that this legislation provides us with that opportunity. So we don't want in any way to be critical of our current partners. We're doing a lot of good work, but we're quite clear that more can be delivered.
Sorry, I was perhaps I didn't express myself very clearly. What I was wanting to point out was that, and possibly in response to the question around will this create an additional burden, is that many of the things that are being proposed are already, a variation of them is already being carried out. So in that sense, there's not, unless the legislation does change very, very significantly, there's not a huge amount of difference in terms of some of the things that the processes we have. But I mean, I do feel again, I think that it does have a great benefit, as I said, in terms of making very, very clear what expectations are. And when we look particularly at the whole agenda of what works in terms of tackling some of the very difficult problems that we and others face, the answer around increased cooperation and collaboration is one that always comes back. So what we would see here is the ability to match both the goodwill and the engagements we've had up until now with this much clearer legislation in terms of duties and in terms of what's expected of us.
I get the impression that you and the department, and obviously the sponsor of the bill, believe that with some amendments this will be a significant improvement in the way we do business, and the beneficiaries will be children and young people.
Yes. Yes.
Excellent. Okay, Maurice and Tony, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Members, as I said, going into that session, there was a significant number of briefing papers. Can I ask, are we content that they will be included in the appendices to our committee report when it's finally published? May I also ask, do you wish to hear in evidence orally from Nikki, the Northern Ireland Commissioner for Children and Young People? Yes, that would seem to make sense. Also, members, in the spirit of cooperation, we've already agreed to share Daniel Greenberg's technical note with the bill's sponsor. Would you be content to do the same with officials at OFMDFM? Yeah, okay, thank you very much. I think, members, we'll now return to the agenda and go into closed session.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.
Today we've had apologies from Michael Copeland and from David Michael Veen. Brenda Hale as well.
Thank you. I'll leave in a few minutes. We'll come back again.
Okay. Problem. Can we go to the draft minutes of our meeting of the additional meeting on Monday, the 2nd of March? That's page 7 of tabled pack. Are we content to agree?
Agreed.
Thank you. Outstanding correspondence at page 40 is the list. Pause for comment. Otherwise, members, at our meeting on Monday, the clerk provided a quick overview of a draft submission of our priorities for inclusion in the committee report on Assembly EU priorities for 2015. This includes an update on the 2014 priorities. It was agreed the committee would return to the matter today. It's at page 15 of your tabled papers. So, in the absence of any comment, are members content to agree the submission for inclusion in the committee report on Assembly EU priorities for 2015? Agreed, thank you. Page 27 of table pack is next. You'll find correspondence from the Committee for Finance and Personnel. This is a briefing paper and a link to an official report from a recent evidence session from Finance and Personnel and SEUPB officials on the progress of the existing EU Peace and Interreg programmes, as well as some information on the new Peace 4 and Interreg 5. Can I ask that members are content to note? Yep. Correspondence summary sheet is at page 43 of today's pack. That's all correspondence since our last meeting, and I ask the clerk to highlight any that may require a decision and leave it open for you members to raise any other correspondence you wish to bring up.
Thanks, Chair. The first item I'd like to refer members to is at page 48 from the RSPB and the Northern Ireland Environment Link. And they've forwarded this piece of correspondence to the committee because this committee has responsibility for the coordination of the Assembly's EU priorities, but the policy issue itself is more relevant to the Environment Committee. So, with members' agreement, we'll forward that correspondence to the Environment Committee.
Agreed. Alex, you can give us 3 more minutes, could you? Just, yeah, I want to get to that.
Okay. Sorry, the next thing I'd like to draw members' attention to is an email received following the event last week with the Bites project. It's at page 49. So the group are just thanking the committee for the opportunity for the young people to engage with the elected representatives, and the report on that will be brought to members shortly, just providing an update on the discussions from that day. Chair, you'd wanted to mention Interaction Belfast?
Yes, members. We went up into West Belfast and we had our evidence session at T-Buck with Interaction Belfast and Force Spring. I got a phone call yesterday from Roisin McGlone of Interaction Belfast to say that they had just been told that their funding from CRC had not been renewed. I think Forcebring are in the same position now. It just seems to me, having gone out there so recently, basically saying, talk to us because you are involved in good, if not best practice in this area, that we should not ignore the alert from Interaction Belfast that CRC have told them their funding is not being extended beyond the end of the month. So if members are content, I was thinking that perhaps a way to do this would be to ask Roisin to write detailing what has happened, her concerns, and expressing herself as she wishes to. And with your permission, once we get that letter, rather than wait another week, we would simply forward it with a cover note from me to the department, and that cover note would simply be factual. There would be no, please review this or whatever. Just say, find enclosed this note from Interaction Belfast. We would be pleased to hear your views. Okay, sorry, I just wanted you to be here because you were up at the meeting.
My understanding that a particular scheme called the Pathfinder funding scheme has been mentioned as a possible way to provide a short-term solution in relation to that, so perhaps members would be content with you including reference to whether the Pathfinding funding scheme is a possible short-term solution in relation to the issue.
Yeah. What I would anticipate, I think, Chris, is that Roisin would say, here's where we are, here's a potential fix.
Sure.
But I think it's important to, if we're going to progress it quickly,
Yep.
and you're trusting me not to bring it to the next meeting, that my cover note, which we'll email out, is just pure fact and enough to get the letter done to the officials at OFMDFM.
Great.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yep, thanks, Chair. And the final item I'd just like to bring to members' attention is at page 40 of the table papers. It's 2 items of correspondence from the Finance Personnel Committee and the ETI Committee. And they've copied the committee into correspondence that they've issued to the Secretary of State and to the First and Deputy First Minister regarding the Corporation Tax NI Bill. And they're raising concerns that local mutual and credit unions may be potentially disadvantaged in terms of not being granted exemption from the tax for back office activity. It's just to draw that to members' attention at this point.
Okay. Thank you very much. Members, move on to a couple of pieces of subordinate legislation. The first proposal makes a technical amendment to Article 36(1)(b) of the Sex Discrimination Northern Ireland Order of 1976. It seeks to address concerns raised by the European Commission regarding the transposition of the Gender Directive, which implements the principle of equal treatment between men and women in the access to and supply of goods and services. The Clerk's cover note is at page 62 of your packs. Correspondence from the Department outlining the policy proposal is at page 64. The Department are advising us that amending the article will clarify the type of services covered by the exception in Articles 36(1)(b) and 36(ZAC) of the 76 Order. They're those related to religious worship and observance, and they're not normally provided on a commercial basis. The Department is further advising us that taking this action will remove any legal uncertainty produced by the interaction between Articles 36(1)(b) and 36(ZAC, and will address the concerns raised by the European Commission in respect to this matter. So the proposed statutory rule is there. It will be subject to negative resolution. Members have any comments, or are we content with the proposal for the rule? I think content, and of course the statutory rule, once it's laid in the Business Office, it will be provided for consideration by the committee along with the relevant report from the Examiner of Statutory Rules. The second one is to amend the Fair Employment and Treatment Order. Clerk's cover notes page 75 and departmental correspondence at 77. The Department are saying that this policy proposal will amend Article 73 of the Fair Employment and Treatment Northern Ireland Order of 1998. It will enable compliance with the European Council directive that establishes a general framework for equal treatment in employment, occupation on grounds of disability, sexual orientation, religious belief and age. The need for the amendment has arisen to ensure the exception requiring a job to be done by a person holding or not holding a particular religious belief fully complies with Article 4 of the directive. The Department say it hasn't consulted on the proposal rule as it's deemed to be technical and doesn't alter the current policy position. And again, the rule will be subject to the negative resolution procedure. So, in the absence of comment, are members content with the proposal for the rule? And once again, once it's been laid in the Business Office, we'll be considering it again along with the report from the Examiner of Statutory Rules. Now, we'll move to our next witness session. Members, we've agreed to continue our focus on victims and survivors, and we have two related briefings. The first from the Victims and Survivors Service, the second will be from departmental officials. In your packs at page 178, you'll see a briefing from the Victims and Survivors Service, which was provided in advance of today's meeting. Members, we welcome to the committee Mr. Oliver Wilkinson, who is the interim chairperson of the Victims and Survivors Service, and Ms. Margaret Bateson, who is the interim chief executive officer of the VSS, and you're both very welcome. Would you like to give us some comments before we get into the question session? Oliver, are you going to?
Yes, thank you, Chair. You've had our report. I don't propose to go through it in any detail, but just a few points, if I could, to place the report in context. First of all, it's about a year since I first came before this committee, when I joined the board of the Victim and Survivor Service, and it's been quite a challenging year in that we have had to put it fairly bluntly, we've had to get our own house in order. There were many problems within the organisation in terms of how we were perceived to be doing the job that we were tasked to do. And we had two very critical reports setting out a long series of recommendations which we had to address. I come here today and say confidently that we have addressed our responsibility. We still have work to do, but we're a more confident organisation, and we are providing the services that I believe we are expected to provide. We're doing it in a timely and efficient fashion, and as a result of that, I believe our relationships with victims, survivors, and the many groups that we fund throughout the community has significantly improved. The second thing I would say is, on the last occasion that we were here about October, you, Chair, and other members asked some hard questions about funding for the organisation. You may recall that our funding had reduced, and there still was an expectation that we provide efficient and effective services to victims and survivors. Perhaps it isn't a coincidence that shortly after we received word that we had additional funding come to the organisation, and we are currently working very hard to get that money out to the people who need it. And secondly, in a time when there are serious financial constraints, which we all know within our community, and I am very pleased that additional funding has been made available to our organisation for the 15-16 year to enable us to provide services on a much more solid, sound footing for victims, survivors and the groups that we fund. So we're looking forward to a good year during which we will hopefully both use the money that we have been given wisely and at the same time engage in hard conversations with many of the groups that we fund to make sure that they are doing all that they can and should be doing for and on behalf of victims and survivors. And I've no doubt that's going to be a positive engagement with them. We have excellent groups out there doing marvellous work, and we have a great deal of respect for them. And the final thing I would say is we have been greatly assisted over the past year by both the staff in the Commission, who have worked very closely with us, and with the staff in the department. And I would put on record our thanks to both for the way in which they have sought to work in partnership with us to make sure that we are collectively doing the best that we can for people in need within our community. I would leave it at that and invite any questions that perhaps people wish to ask.
Oliver, thank you very much for those remarks. I just want to acknowledge that you very openly chose to begin your remarks by acknowledging these two reports, which you said are very critical of the service. I just want to respond by saying that one of the reports makes very clear that one of the primary reasons the VSS did not get off to a good start was a failure by the department in terms of putting in place a board in sufficient time and in sufficient depth of quality of membership to give the strategic direction that the board appeared to lack at the beginning. And I'm not mentioning that because I'm trying to start slanging match between the VSS and the department. That's in the past. Let's look at where we are today. You're on the board. How many other members are there on the board?
2 other members on the board. One member resigned for personal reasons back August, I think, last year. We are very hopeful that 4 additional members will be appointed to our board shortly. That will certainly add considerably to our strength, and that's much needed.
For how long have you been saying, I hope to be joined by new members of the board shortly?
Well, we would have liked, Chair, to have had 7 or 8 members right from the outset. That hasn't been possible, but is now.
It's a diplomatic answer, Oliver, but I'm going to ask again. For how long have you been waiting with a reasonable expectation of additional members being appointed?
Since I joined the board, which is about 15 months ago.
15 months. Have you asked why there is an ongoing delay?
We have constantly had conversations with the department, who, in fairness, have been working with us on this issue. I would not wish to be overly critical of the departmental officials who we have worked with, who I have felt have been genuine and honest in trying to address this problem with us.
Has it created a gap in expectation between what you thought you would be doing in your role on the board and what you have had to do over the last 15 months through necessity?
Not really, Chair. In some ways, the organisation needed a very small group of people. Given the challenge that we had, we needed a small group of people who were prepared to give a considerable amount of time. And all 3 of us have honestly tried to do so. We have spent, and I would say this on behalf of my 2 colleagues, we have spent way beyond the hours that might be expected in order to ensure that an organisation that we have passion for, we think it is a good organisation and can be much better. So we have given the time to try and develop the organisation. It would have been better had we had more people to enable to share that load, but it hasn't stopped us from doing what needed to be done.
And given the well-publicised criticism that the VSS has come under, perhaps as this is a formal session, it would be only right to give you an opportunity to put on record your motivation for doing what you do?
Well, I've been around for quite a few years in the survivor field, from my initial work in victim support and now in the Victim and Survivor Service. It's something that I have had an interest in for many years, like I am quite sure many other people in this room. I feel I do have a contribution to make, but it's a contribution with others, because the task is much bigger than me, much bigger than the three of us, but hopefully will be better managed with the additional members that I understand we should have very shortly.
Okay. I'd like to move on to the finances, which is maybe one for Margaret. Just refresh our memory, Margaret, of what was a financial year 14-15 that was pretty much a roller coaster in terms of your funding streams.
Yeah, certainly a difficult context within the budget for 14-15. Our opening budget was confirmed in May 2014 as 11.685 million. We then bid for further funding in June monitoring, and we didn't get any additional funding. Our budget was reduced to £10 million at that point. So we went through a difficult period of having to basically any contractual obligations we weren't yet entered into, we had to stop. And then we made monitoring bids in October and January, and we received 1.3 million and 1.3 million in each of those monitoring rounds. So our budget position now is 12.6 million, which is roughly comparable to what we spent the previous year of 12.8 million.
But because it was going up and down, there were situations where individuals and groups who had a reasonable expectation they would receive support from the VSS had to be told, you tick all the boxes, you meet our criteria, but we have no money in the bank. How many groups and individuals lost out because of that?
Under the Victim Support Programme, there were 9 organisations who had applied for funding and were assessed by the Independent Assessment Panel. 8 of those were approved or partially approved, and 1 of those was deferred pending corporate governance review. So 9 organisations under the Victim Support Programme. And under the Individual Needs Programme, at that point in time, the VSS board had to take the difficult decision really to try and prioritise needs, and that's quite a complex thing to do with the different needs within the victims sector. And at that time we just opened the schemes to carers and those with ongoing chronic pain needs, specifically the seriously injured. So it meant at that point in time there was around 2,000 bereaved that we weren't able to offer support to under the Individual Needs Programme, and a number of injured as well.
So 9 organisations, around 2,000 bereaved. Had you known at the outset that you'd end up with 12.6 million, would those 9 organisations and 2,000 bereaved have been catered for?
The 2,000 bereaved would have been catered for, and they have been. The bereaved received an award of £200 in December. That's when we found out about October monitoring, and an additional £200 in January when we found out about January monitoring. The 9 organisations are unlikely to have received that support in this financial year because the Victim Support Programme budget is still set at just over £6 million.
So tell me about the £200. Is it the case then that those individuals would have been used to receiving £400?
In the past, the bereaved would have been eligible for 2 schemes, education and training, or respite break. The respite break was around £200, well, it wasn't around, it was £200 per adult and £150 per child. So the average respite break would have been about £450 averaged out across everyone. This year, because we knew we only had a budget of £400 for the bereaved, we gave flexibility, so that instead of saying it must be used in education and training or it must be used on a respite break, we said, well, we know your needs, you've told us what your needs are, so home heating, complementary therapies or a respite break.
But you sent out before Christmas £200, and then because you got more money from the department, you sent out another 200. And presumably you would have preferred to have sent out the 400 as one. Did anybody contact you when you got the second £200 allocation?
Any bereaved?
When you sent out the second 200, did anybody contact you and say, I've already got my £200?
Yeah, and I think it's hard to tell exactly what causes peaks in our frontline delivery, but certainly you'll see from our telephone management, we'd managed quite well, October, November, December, we got it under control, we knew what resources we needed and we had our systems in place. And in January, our phone calls went over 2,000 in the month, and that really caused us, we started to struggle at that point.
And why
really,
did they go over 2,000?
It's hard to directly link it, but I suspect that individuals were saying, is this another 200, can I spend it? We spent a while trying to get the wording right. We engaged with the Commission for Victims and Survivors to ensure that that was clear. But I think, remember, in August, we had to reduce awards and cancel some awards. So people are anxious, and when they receive a letter, they just want someone at the end of the phone to say, yes, it's okay. This is another £200.
A significant number of people thought, I need to check whether this is an additional £200 or whether there's been an administrative error, and if I spend this second £200, you're going to come looking it back. Yeah. Shame. What about this financial year? Is there any more certainty?
In the coming financial year, we have an opening budget position of £13.245 million. So that's the highest budget that's ever been allocated to the Victims and Survivors Service. We're still undergoing discussions internally exactly how that would be allocated for the year. But we know that for the Victim Support Programme, then there's the 9 letters of offer that were on hold. We've carried out we're carrying out at the moment pre-contract checks on each of those organisations, and those reports will go to our VSS board on the 18th of March for a decision in those. So for those organisations that have the correct corporate governance structures in place, they will receive funding from the 1st of April. Under the Individual Needs Programme, we don't anticipate in making dramatic changes to the eligibility criteria, and likewise within the VSS, I think we're pretty much at a structure that's the bare minimal that we need, and there's unlikely to be any changes in staffing, significant changes, albeit we will be moving office premises next year.
I'm sure members will want to talk about that. I'll just finish for now, Margaret, with this. Last year you said you opened at 11.685 but dropped to 10. You're opening this year at 13 something. Can you guarantee this committee that that figure will not drop in the way it dropped from 11 to 10 last year?
I don't think that's a guarantee that the VSS can give. The budget is allocated by the department.
So it could drop. If it dropped last year, it could drop this year?
I think it is a question for the department.
Well, we will ask it shortly. Okay. Jimmy Spratt.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Oliver and Margaret, for your presentation. And can I say, I appreciate your frankness with us, and I mean, I think things have been dramatically turned around. Margaret, you and your staff have done a very good job in turning that around, given the complaints that we had in the past before the reports came out. That seems to have dried up now. It doesn't seem to be happening. There seem to be any of the organisations or anything else coming to us with a list or a shopping list of problems. So I think you have turned it around, and I think that's down to the hard work of the board and yourself and your staff. Can I ask you a couple of things? In terms of, and I just can't remember the exact number, but I think it was about 48 recommendations in the original report. Was it 48?
70.
70? Right. Well, of the 70, I know that quite a lot of them had been implemented the last time that you were with us. Some of them have been partially implemented. In terms of those recommendations, which I think all of which were accepted, have they now all been implemented in some form?
They've all been implemented in some form, but just to be clear, they haven't been implemented in full in all cases. So there is a total of 19 outstanding recommendations, which sounds like a lot, but a number of them related to multiple areas. So, for example, monitoring and evaluation, 5 or 6 recommendations related to that area, and likewise the assessment process. So those 19 outstanding recommendations have been brought forward and relate to 3 key areas, one being the VSS board and the strength of the board, monitoring and evaluation of the programmes, and the third one, I've just taken a mind blank. I'll come back to you, it'll come back to me. But the assessment process, how to assess individual needs, which was previously the individual needs review, how that can be. So they're the 3 areas. And they haven't just been hidden away, you know, they've been taken forward in an open process. They're on our business plan for 15-16, because there are longer term areas of work. And the department are also taking the lead on a co-design process, which involves us, the department, the commission, the groups and individuals in terms of how we improve services going forward.
Just in terms of, and I think it was you, Oliver, who said the department and officials were working well together, and I think there's very clear evidence that that actually is the case, that officials and yourselves, certainly of my knowledge within the department, that seems to have been a very regular liaison, and that if there is problems, you're getting those problems resolved at a fairly early stage. So it's good to hear that as well, because I think there were issues originally as well in terms of the previous reports and stuff like that. Just in terms, Margaret, of your own position in terms of interim chief executive, is there a move to a more positive position? Or is there any sort of a process? Or
as a board, we are currently consulting on what the job description, what the responsibilities of that post should be. We're working as board members, but also in consultation with the department, and will shortly be doing so with the Commission. We couldn't rush that simply because there was a further substantial report being completed, and that was a report by RSM McClure Waters, which roughly sets out the plan of action for the next few years. We wanted to get that report in our hands and see what the implications of that were for the organisation before appointing someone and then finding we had to make significant changes to that person's job description or had to re-advertise or whatever. So now that we have the RSM McClure Waters report, we are now beginning the process of recruiting a new chief executive.
Would it be, sorry, Jimmy, would it be possible for us to have a copy of that report?
Yes, it's the Commission's property, but it has been shared around, so I would imagine it's.
Thank you. Sorry, Jimmy.
It's really available.
And does it make a number of recommendations?
It makes.
It was just published last week by the Commission for Victims and Survivors, and it makes a number of strategic and operational recommendations. And the idea is that we would use this incoming financial year to take our time in doing it properly. So victim support programme, there's a number of recommendations, but I suppose the key one, or 2 key ones, are looking more towards a strategic allocation of funding. So carrying out a needs analysis and a gap analysis to make sure that services are located in the areas where the need is. And on the individual needs programme, 2 key recommendations, one being that we would pilot over the next financial year a caseworker approach, where we've listened to individuals who they don't like ringing the service and getting a different person each time, so it's trying to align individuals to caseworkers, not just within the VSS, but in the sector, within the groups. And the second key recommendation is to pilot a personalised budget approach, and really it's about offering more flexibility to victims. So if you think last year there was criticism around having to fit into boxes, you know, a respite break or education and training, or so it's more that you would have a personalised budget, and then the caseworker would work with you to identify your exact needs on an individual basis. And we're working with the Commission for Victims and Survivors on that at the minute.
In terms of that report, I assume that you're working closely with officials of the department?
Yeah. The idea is that the co-design process, which is a monthly meeting, would use those recommendations in addition to the recommendations outstanding from the assessment of the VSS as the starting position, and making sure then that they're all brought forward.
Thanks, Chair.
Sorry, could I just add, and it relates to what you were saying earlier, Chair. We have a very clear indication as to what our budget is for the next year. The importance of that is that it adds stability and security, which is precisely what we need in order to address the recommendations in this report. Because we, over the period of the next year, we want to begin to pilot, in consultation with victims and survivors, the Victims Forum, the various groups that we fund, the Department and the Commission. We want to try out things to see if we can come up with a model or models of practice which work better than we've been able to do up until now. So we don't need to lose any of the funding that we understand we will have over the next 12 months.
From that, Oliver, would it be reasonable to extrapolate and say you would be happy if that budget remained a budget through the whole financial year, rather than putting emphasis on monitoring rounds to secure additional funding? Because stability is the buzzword for this financial year.
Certainly, to address the recommendations, and we, of course, fully support all of the recommendations that are in the RSM Clear Waters report. We work closely with them. We think they are taking us in the right direction. And provided we work in the co-design format that the department are suggesting we should work in partnership with others, we should be able to provide the stability that's necessary for tough conversations to take place. If we were in last year's situation, we couldn't possibly look at this report because we didn't know where we were from month to month. Now we have the stability that enables us to have those hard conversations.
Thank you. Deputy Chair, Chris Little.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for your presentation. You've answered many of the questions that I was going to ask, but can I ask you to give us a brief insight to the impact that the variable funding arrangement that you found yourself in last year had on victims and survivors' experience in the service?
I think what I found in the last while is that victims like and need certainty, and I think having uncertainty in terms of what services they could have for the year had an impact on a lot of individuals. I think, as the Chair outlined before, sending just under 2,000 people £200 before Christmas, and then 3 weeks later sending another £200 is confusing for the individual, and it's obviously not a good use of internal resources within the VSS either. We're also aware of the impact on those who are injured. This year we did apply eligibility criteria of middle and high rate DLA. The reason why we did that is so that we wouldn't have to reassess people. Individuals have already gone through a robust assessment, and we know that would then determine that they've ongoing chronic pain needs through that assessment. But we were aware as well that that also left those not on DLA who potentially had chronic pain needs. We did address that somewhat in December when additional funding came through, where there were 40 individuals in that scenario who came forward where we had stopped treatment plans and we were able to continue those. but we're just aware that there may be others out there who might have ongoing chronic pain needs, and we've been addressing those on a case-by-case basis. But I guess it's just the timing, not being able to do that until December, January, at the end of the financial year. And now we're in a position where all our funding is allocated, but will we spend and draw down the full amount? We're obviously working hard internally to make sure that's the case, but there will be difficulties because of the timing of the release of funding.
Hopefully that baseline remains stable for you throughout the year to allow you to overcome some of those difficulties. I would like to think that the personal caseworker approach would assist with clear communications around eligibility for the programmes as well, and I welcome the pilot of that particular approach. The Alliance Party proposal during the HAS talks that in relation to processes relating to victims and survivors, that there would be an advocate counsellor. So I think the same principle of one point of contact to navigate what can be pretty complicated procedures at times.
We're going to pause here for several party political broadcasts, or
no? So I welcome that approach. I look forward to hearing more about the outcome in relation to it, and wish you well. Can I ask what you think are the two key challenges for VSS going forward?
Mention one. Give you time to think.
Give me time to think.
We have to get much better at in the whole process of monitoring and evaluating what it is that is happening by our groups and organisations out there. It is always very difficult in the third sector to get agreement on monitoring and evaluation criteria. And we're currently working hard with them to try and agree a format in which we can come back to you and say, this is what is being done precisely with the money that is being given to these groups, and we can show that they are all operating to this level in this way, and this is the statistical information which shows it, and not just the statistical information, but the effectiveness of the different programmes that they're using. We have no doubt that there's excellent work being done out there. We want to capture it in a way that is useful to all of us. We haven't quite got that right. But then, as I say, in the third sector, it's a very difficult thing to get right. Over the next year, we intend to come to an agreement with groups that would enable us to do that.
I think a second challenge in the year ahead is having a strong baseline budget position, and the expectations then that sets in terms of meeting the needs of all individual victims and survivors who come forward to the VSS, and meeting all the needs of the victim support programme groups. Because I think this year, and continuing over the last number of months, we can see the complexity of the needs, sometimes the expectations, and still the numbers of victims coming forward. We know that a baseline budget of 13 million will still mean that we have to make difficult decisions as to who may be able to access direct support from us and who we need to sort of refer through other agencies. So I think that's going to be very difficult, because there's potentially a message that we have sufficient budget now to meet all those needs, and we're acutely aware that that's not the case. We're working hard internally to try and obviously maximise what that money can do, and the board will be ratifying that on the 18th of March.
And Deputy Chair, could I take the liberty of adding a third? What we need is the post of Commissioner filled as soon as possible. We benefit from having that critical friend watching what we do, commenting on it, and keeping us focused on what we have to do. We have a very good relationship with the Commission staff. That couldn't be better, but the sooner that post is filled, the better it will be for all of us, because I have come to realise in the past year that there are three parts to this. There's the service, is the Commission and is the Department working then with all of the groups and organisations out there. And we are most effective when all three of those are in place.
Sure, that's something we can take up with the department immediately after here, but I wish you well in all the work. It's hugely important to our community, so thank you.
I think there is a circle there of the Commission, of the Department, the Commission, yourselves and the Forum, and if all were in place, that there would be a virtuous circle, as it were. Bronwyn McGann.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation. This might be a minor issue. In your presentation on page 12, the call management of client calls, the organisation has not used the NI direct messaging solution in October 2014. And then further on down, below the graph, stated that the system worked well from October to December 2014 with 87%. So are you using the system or not, and if not, why not?
We don't use the system for two reasons. The first feedback from individuals was they didn't like it. So it was NI Direct operators who were taking messages and then relaying them to the VSS. It served its purpose at the time because what it meant was at least we were able to have messages left and call the individual back rather than it resulting in a missed call and an unanswered call. And the second reason is we don't believe we need it. We're currently, with our current capacity, operating well. We have the resource sorted out. We've systems sorted out, albeit with any system you've got your hardware and software failures that you manage on a daily basis. And we did have a difficulty in January. It came across us quite quickly. You can see the calls rose from 1,600 in December to 2,500 in January. But even though in February our calls increased again, so our actual, this was sort of a mid-month report, we took just under 3,200 calls in February and we still maintained that 97% call rate. The point being, even with increased calls, we're still managing well. We just don't feel we need the service of a messaging service.
Okay. Margaret, you hinted at change of premises. Perhaps you should brief the committee on what's happening.
The business case for a change of premises was approved by the department last week, so we will be moving from Millennium House to another city centre location. I'm not sure I should say where because the landlord on the other side we still haven't signed off. Okay. You know, the business case has just been approved. Okay. But it's another city centre location, and we're moving for two reasons. The obvious one, to save costs and try and put those into the frontline programmes instead. And secondly, the premises is more suitable to the number of staff that we currently have. So we had taken over the Children's Commission premises, ground floor, first floor. We just don't need that amount of space.
So where are we on staff? Just refresh my memory.
We have 26 permanent staff, and that's what I would see as our core function staff. That's really what we need to do our day-to-day operations. We need that to respond to client queries, clients dropping in, payment processing and all your usual governance activities. Once we start going above making development or improvements, that's where we do need more resource. So at the moment, with the 1.3 million that came in January, we've brought in an additional 6 temporary staff, one provided by the Commission for Victims and Survivors and the rest through us. And those staff are strengthening and supporting the payments processing unit, because we've issued 2,000 letters, another 2,000 letters. They're all going to come back in payment claims. So we strengthened the payments processing unit, and we also have a small team working for 3 months on our management information systems. So there are two MIS officers and 2 admin officers, and that's a very short-term project that we envisage in the longer term one person can maintain and take forward.
Did you say there were 2,000 people who got the 2 times 200 cheques? So how much did that cost to send out the second tranche?
I don't know what a first-class stamp costs these days.
65p or something? Wow. So way over £1,000. Okay, and the 26 permanent staff, are they pretty stable? Not what sort of churn have you got there?
Very little. I think we've one member of staff has retired in the last 7 months. I don't think we've had any other changes.
Is it a challenging role, do you think, to be a member of the VSS staff? Because particularly over the last year, as we've discussed, with the budget fluctuating and promises being made and then having not been able to deliver on them, there was clearly a lot of pain and anger amongst your clients. How did the staff deal with that?
It's always difficult for staff in the front line managing that distress and anger, because sometimes it's the messenger is confused with the message, and that's been extremely difficult. But we do have the right 6 people on the front line who are good at what they do, and they manage it well on a daily basis. I think with all the changes over the last 6-7 months, with change brings natural challenge and it brings fear, and there are a number of staff who might struggle more than others with those change processes. We do have support mechanisms in place. Each member of staff has a monthly one-to-one supervision with their line manager. We have an in-house psychologist who works with us 2 days a week, and she mostly works out with the groups in terms of training and development there. She's also carried out a number of training for staff on managing client risk, managing self-stress, self-care, and things like that. So it's just about trying to put those support mechanisms in place. And in terms of dealing with the pressures as well, staff are very directly involved in our business planning process, where we will have monthly and quarterly planning meetings with all staff, where the chair will attend representatives from the department and the CVS in an attempt that staff understand where the pressures come from and that each team's pressures are managed in that way.
Do you have to put all those processes in place yourself? Or do you get support from the department?
I think it's the responsibility of the VSS to put those processes in place. I'm not saying that I don't get support from the department, but I haven't felt the need to ask the department for support in those areas.
A protocol from the department in that sense? I remember when I was involved in setting up the Victims Commission, there was something like 3 dozen separate protocols, as well as a financial memorandum and all the rest.
We have a memorandum, an MSFM between ourselves.
Management statement, financial memorandum. Mm-hmm.
But it probably focuses more so on accounting officer duties in terms of financial, budgetary management, and less so on staff management, staff welfare.
Members, are we content? Okay, Margaret, Oliver, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Members, we'll now have a briefing from departmental officials. An update on victims and survivors issues is available in table packs at page 79. I also refer you to correspondence from the department in your main pack at page 194. It indicates the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister have asked officials to commence a new recruitment competition to appoint a Commissioner for Victims and Survivors, as the previous process, quote, produced a disappointingly small pool of appointable candidates. And we welcome to the table Patricia McIntyre and Ricky Irwin. My goodness, my notes suggest you're going to make opening remarks, Ricky.
Yes, indeed, Chair. Okay, good afternoon. Very pleased to be invited today to give the committee an update on victims and survivors, and straight after Margaret and Oliver from VSS. There have been a number of positive developments since we were last here on the 8th of October. At our last briefing, we did outline progress on the implementation of the recommendations arising from the independent assessment of the VSS, and work has continued to implement these recommendations. To date, 51 of the 70 recommendations have been fully implemented. The remaining recommendations, which relate to the assessment process, monitoring and evaluation, protocols for dealing with the psychologically injured and better communication, are being taken forward as part of a collaborative design programme of work to improve services to victims and survivors, and Margaret touched on that earlier. And this is in line with the previous Commissioner's recommendation, which was to transition from an administrative model to a service model of delivery within VSS for victims. So, outstanding recommendations which relate to the governance and the VSS board are being taken forward as part of the outworkings of the recruitment exercise for our new chair and additional board members. And these appointments are currently pending security checks and will be announced very, very soon. The Commission re-engaged with WKM Solutions and SIPFA to undertake a review of progress against the implementation of the independent assessment, and I'm pleased to report that the follow-up was positive and has acknowledged significant improvement in a number of key areas, including relationships and communication between VSS and key stakeholders, and considerable progress regarding the implementation of the recommendations contained in both the initial report and the Commissioner's covering advice, which came to Ministers on the 14th of February last year. But let's be clear, there's still further work to do. Throughout 14-15, VSS has continued to provide funding to victims and survivors through the Individual Needs Programme and through the Victim Support Programme, and Margaret has outlined some of that. Despite the challenging budgetary constraints, the service has proactively managed its budget to maintain frontline services, including communicating clearly and sensitively with victims and stakeholders. It has worked closely with ourselves in the Department and the Commission to obtain feedback on communication in order to try and minimise any confusion and distress. And again, you've heard Oliver and Margaret talk about that. The VSS initial budget for 14-15 was reduced, and whilst the bid for additional resources was not met in June monitoring, an additional £1.3 million was secured in October monitoring to restore VSS to its baseline position of 13-14. A further bid of an additional £1.3 million was secured in January 2015, and this took the VSS budget to £12.6 million this year. And again, Margaret has outlined how she intends to fully expend that on meeting the delivery of services before the end of March. I had outlined at my last appearance that a number of schemes to assist individuals had been opened over the summer months. And I'm pleased to report that in securing the additional funding in both those monitoring rounds this year, VSS was able to make 1,955 awards for £400 under the Support for the Bereaved scheme. And flexibility was given to allow awards to be used towards the cost of home heating, complementary therapies or a respite break. And in doing this, VSS had listened to feedback it got from Forum, the Commission and other stakeholders, and it was a much welcome approach in terms of that flexibility. Under the Support for the Injured scheme, a further 700 awards were made for either those on DLA middle rate care component or those with agreed management treatment plans, and the awards in that case were £400, or in the case of DLA high rate care component, the awards were for £1,500, and these awards were towards costs for therapies and eligible goods and services. In addition, whilst there was no increase to the £500 paid through the Care for Care scheme, again I'm pleased to report that VSS has now issued all award letters, and that's a total of 400 individuals who had registered for that support. VSS had also provided a further £350 to those individuals who had been awarded £650 under Financial Assistance Scheme 6 when it was a two-phased approach. And therefore that took the total amount awarded to every individual under Scheme 6 to £1,000, which was in line with previous awards. I am pleased to be able to advise that the budget for 15-16 has been agreed at £13.245 million, and it is its highest level since VSS was established. In light of the independent assessment of VSS and the ongoing collaborative design work, the Department is in the process of preparing an addendum to the business case for programme funding to roll forward for a further year, and this will allow sufficient time for a new service delivery model to be designed and agreed, and any revised operational and governance structures to be put in place as a result of the collaborative design programme. The appointment of a new Commissioner for victims and survivors remains a key priority for ministers. The competition reached an advanced stage. However, it produced a disappointingly small pool of appointable candidates. I'm sure you will recognise the need to ensure that victims and survivors have an appropriate representative voice through the Commissioner, and therefore the importance of identifying the right person for the job. In light of this, it has been decided to widen the pool of appointable candidates through a new competition, and this competition has now been launched. I would want to assure the Committee that whilst the Commission has continued to operate without a Commissioner, it remains fully committed, operational and accessible to all victims and survivors and organisations working with victims and survivors. Candidates from the current competition will remain on the deemed appointable list, and we have thrown the net wider in this competition in terms of advertising, increasing the remuneration for the post, and looking at practical issues such as relocation costs in order to attract a wider pool. Additionally, in relation to the appointment of a permanent VSS chair and additional board members, the competition is at an advanced stage. I touched on this earlier. Interviews have taken place, and ministers have selected a chair and additional board members from the list of candidates that I sent forward. Further details will be announced very soon, but we can't go into detail because those individuals are going through the necessary security checks prior to that kind of appointment. But I would anticipate that these will be finalised before the end of this month, possibly even next week, if the checks go through quickly. In the meantime, the interim chair and the board continues to meet as required to fulfil its obligations, and you've heard Oliver outline that. And I commend both the board and VSS senior management team and Margaret for its leadership during this challenging period. I had previously advised the committee that the department was in discussion with health officials on how best to meet psychological needs of victims through the potential enhancement of service provision in the healthcare sector. And in line with recommendation 23 of the WKM report to the Commission, we have continued discussions with the Commission, DHSSPS and the Health and Social Care Board on protocols with the statutory health services where victims are identified as requiring acute psychological or psychiatric interventions. As part of the collaborative design programme of work, a number of pilots are scheduled to be taken forward during the 15-16 year, and Margaret touched on those. Preliminary work has commenced in the two areas to look at the best approach to implementing personalised budgets where a package of care is developed for individuals rather than rigid schemes, and then the second pilot around the introduction of dedicated caseworkers, and we very much welcome this approach. In conclusion, Chair, I hope the committee will acknowledge both the progress that has been made in improving services to victims and also the commitment to continuing with this through our programme of co-design. Indeed, I would like to invite members to take part in the programme by extending an invitation to an event which we are organising towards the end of this month or early April, which will look at identifying the key priorities under the themes of individual funding, group funding and mental health services, and I look forward to your input. So that would conclude the presentation. I'm very happy to take any questions I have.
Maggie, thank you very much. Let's start with the board. I understand there's constraints that prevent you discussing many details. Security checks are underway. Let us say the security checks are all positive in terms of there are no issues. Are you saying that there will be a board which will consist of a named chair plus 6 or plus 7?
Plus 6.
So there will be 7 people,
yes.
One of whom has been identified as the desired chair.
That's right.
And,
yep.
and it's out of your hands going through security checks. Okay. Then the issue of the Commissioner for Victims and Survivors.
Mm-hmm.
The process has been run. Mm-hmm. A small pool of appointable candidates has been identified. None has been selected by the ministers, who have decided instead to run a second process with all those already deemed appointable carried forward.
That's correct.
This has happened before.
Right.
To me, may I add.
Okay.
And the outcome was a decision by the then FM and DFM without consultation, as far as we can make out, with anybody else, not to appoint a commissioner but to appoint 4.
Okay.
Is that an option, to appoint more than 1 at this stage?
I couldn't possibly say whether that's an option. That's not within my gift to make that recommendation. My job is very clear: to chair the recruitment panel and to present a list of appointable people, and that's what I will be doing.
Which are not in rank order, presumably just people who have cleared whatever bar there is and are in the category called deemed appointable.
That's right.
Do you know the difference between appointable and appropriate, which is the phrase you used in terms of none was considered appropriate?
Okay.
In your opening remarks, you said
yes,
none was considered appropriate, or it was important to get an appropriate.
Yes, yes. Well, in the context of ensuring that, in terms of having an appropriate voice.
Yes. So you have people
victims, yes,
who are deemed appointable, but clearly not deemed appropriate. So what's the difference?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily accept that. I mean,
I'm using your words.
Yes, but in the context that there has to be the appropriate voice for victims in the role of commissioner. I think that's a reasonable statement to make. You know, in relation to comparing the word.
I don't see how you can say this person is deemed appointable if they're not appropriate.
I'm not saying that, Chair. What I'm saying is the statement that I made was a reasonable statement. Deemed appointable is making that decision is a matter for ministers. That is not something that I get into. It's up to ministers to make the decision.
So you judge by some criteria, and the ministers then can apply a different criterion or criteria. Yours are appointable, and the ministers are appropriate.
I mean, Chair, this process is very closely scrutinised by the Commissioner for Public Appointments and regulated by them. So, you know, I am working within that protocol. So,
well, I'm really genuinely just trying to understand the difference between a candidate who is appointable and a candidate who is deemed appropriate. But let's move on to the budget, because as we heard from Margaret, last year it had opened at 11.685 but dropped. This year it's opening at 13.245.
Yes.
Can you guarantee that the committee it will not drop?
Well, Chair, I mean, I think you'll accept that as an official, it's not within my gift to give an absolute guarantee around a budget, around a decision that I don't have any power over. However, let me be clear about this. I have always put forward that where VSS requires extra money, that it should get it to meet need of victims coming forward. And I came here in October and we went over the issue of the initial allocation of VSS in some detail. And I think, you know, we have to look at the lessons from that. And I think ministers, in the decision which has been made to provide 13.2 million, is sending a very clear message that VSS needs stability in the 15-16 year. So, as far as I can, I will be out to make sure that that is the minimum budget and that is not in any way, shape or form. And also, let me say, I have not heard any doubt or anything which indicates that that will be reduced at any stage going forward. So, while that's not what you were looking for, it's as much as I think I can give.
I think it's a very welcome statement, actually, because you are obviously constrained by what ministers decide, and I do welcome that statement. As you say, you were here in October, Ricky, and we did ask for sight of the management statement and financial memorandum between yourselves and the VSS, or at least that part relating to the duty of care to staff. 5 months, we're still waiting.
No, I'm aware that the committee has formally made the request, and I mean, that's something that remains under consideration within the department. So that's all I can say on that matter. But I mean, I think just to go into the duty of care issue, and again, I did talk about this the last time, and I think that's what sparked the request. Margaret has outlined the changes that she's put in place in relation to supporting her staff. You know, and I would commend her on that. She's put in place a lot of support for staff. There's been a change in culture. I think, you know, you would accept that that seems to be the case now. The organisation, as an organisation, is still quite new, But let's be clear, it's in a hell of a lot better position than it was a year ago. So where the department has been asked to step up, we have. And, you know, Tricia and I and the team have been there to support Margaret in anything that she's asked for. She did say that she didn't ask us for any particular help around some issues, and that's fine. We need to be careful that we are not treading into operational issues with VSS. The department has a clear role, VSS has a clear role, so we don't want to cross that line. So, I mean, I think the duty of care issue is not something to be worried about, that there's something going wrong.
I think what concerns me is that we, as a committee, as a statutory committee, make a request of the department take it away, and 5 months later they haven't even had the courtesy to come back and say, I tell you what, we can't show you that, or there's an issue, or here it is.
I understand. I understand the time delay, and I think, Chair, you would be aware that all these requests are made formally and they come back to the department, and that's the process. It's not a process that I have any gift to change, but that is the process. All requests are considered.
Jimmy Spratt.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Ricky and Patricia. Ricky, in terms of, and I think it needs to be said very clearly, the department have worked very well regarding the last presentation with getting the recommendations that were made, because there was a mess, let's face it. And in fairness to the department very quickly accepted the problem, worked hard together to get that problem sorted out. And as I said earlier, it's very clear we're not getting the complaints individually from a constituency point of view in relation to many of the issues that we got complaints about before. So I think there's been a lot of very, very good work done, and I think in terms of that, the officials in the department need to be, we need to recognise that you've done hard work in relation to that, and you need to be told thank you for doing that, because it was clearly a very difficult situation that we found ourselves in, and I'm glad the committee pursued it in the way it did. In terms of the, I think it's McClure Waters report, which Margaret referred to earlier, and there's quite a few recommendations in it. I assume more personalised journey that you're going to try and take the clients on, as opposed to the way it's been done in the past. It's been a theme that has been running through from the previous recommendations. So, can you just give us some insight in terms of meetings? I assume that you meet on a monthly or regular basis. I know there's a board, I can't remember the name of it, or something, you meet on a monthly basis. And then you go off. But in terms of this particular report, it seems to be pretty recent.
Yes.
I assume that the department has no problem letting us have some sight to the recommendations in relation to that at some point, so that basically we can all work together in terms of making sure that those things are cleared. But can you give us some insight to the what has been recommended in that report, how you see that report helping, and how you continue to support the VSS on? I assume that support is actually less needed now, because it appears that some fairly robust decisions made, and some of the staffing issues, some of the telephone call issues and all the rest of it appear to have disappeared.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for the comments about our work. Yeah, the reports are on the Commission's website, so they're in the public domain, so there's no issue there. We are meeting with, we have set up a subgroup, which is a collaborative design subgroup, which has the Commission, the Service and the Department, and the idea is to look at these recommendations in more detail. And these recommendations, when you see them, are building on what came out of the independent assessment report a year ago. So it's a direction of travel which Oliver has welcomed. Some of the stuff, just to give you a flavour, there's two reports. There's one for individual needs and there's one for groups. So the individual needs is talking about developing robust monitoring and evaluation, and Oliver touched on that. It says to minimise duplication where services are offered by other providers. So we know that some of the stuff that BSS does in terms of schemes, it's actually available elsewhere, but there's never been any check to see if there's any duplication. So that's about efficiency. There was the two pilots, pilot personalised budgets and pilot caseworker approach. They were a couple of recommendations. And there's also a recommendation around developing a code of practice for eligibility checks, and that actually applies both in the individual report and the group report. In terms of the group report, it talks about embedding partnership working. So this is about developing partnerships both within the sector, within the groups, but also between the likes of the department and groups and the department and the service. It also talks about working towards a strategic allocation of funding, which I think is a reasonable recommendation to make. And that would be in terms of looking at where current need is, looking at current provision, and obviously making sure that the model is the most efficient model for victims. And an obvious recommendation would be to introduce longer funding cycles, and that's something which would come up, not just in the victim sector but in the voluntary community sector. People want stability around contracts. They don't want one-year contracts. They want 3, 4, 5-year contracts, understandably so. So, these are all reasonable and acceptable recommendations, and we want to work very closely with VSS and the Commission, forum included, and groups in how we bring these forward over the course of the next few months. And let me be clear as well, we don't want to make mistakes that were made before. We don't want to do things too quickly. We don't want to introduce changes which are going to be unsettling and destabilising. 15-16 should be a stable year, building on the improvements that have been made in the past 12 months. We're not in the business of coming along and suddenly making a whole series of changes. So the idea of the collaborative design process is to work closely with all stakeholders on this process. And I'll say it again, that includes committee members as far as I'm concerned. So, I would welcome your input on this, and when you've had a chance to look at the reports, certainly get back in touch with it.
Just one last thing, Chair. In terms of, Oliver, I think, referred earlier in terms of group funding, to looking at putting together a process that would look at monitoring how best grants are being spent, best practice in terms of how that money can be more efficiently used in terms of the victims themselves. Is that something that you have had discussions with the interim chair in relation to, and do you see a need for that type of process?
Yes, we've had discussions, and probably more so with Margaret in her capacity as interim CEO. Monitoring and evaluation is something that was picked up in both reports, and monitoring is an issue. We need to look at the impact of this money, and we need to be measuring that data, and we don't have that at the minute, and I think and that is accepted. Now, there's an awful lot of good work that goes on across all the groups, and some of them have fantastic systems in place to capture the journey of the victim through counselling, through whatever service they're offering. And what I found, and we've been out and about, a lot of them are actually doing the same thing and using the same systems, but there hasn't been that kind of consolidation. And Margaret is trying to work with the groups to try and bring that kind of consolidation and standardisation of data and information, and it will help us to understand if we are doing the right things, if the services are the right things, and if victims are being helped. So I think that's important. So we are into those discussions now. I don't know what the end game will look like, but I would be hopeful that there will be robust data that we can use to improve the services even further.
Well, I think that's a very important process, particularly for groups. Suppose it's a sort of a mini type of audit or an audit process as well. But I think it's very important how that's sold to the end user.
Okay.
In fact, the people who benefit from, I think they need to know that this process is going on, and it's trying to improve the amount of money, because there is very substantial money being made available, let's face it. But I think it's important at the very outset of a process like that to make sure that the end user, not just those who are involved in the group, but the end user who benefits from whatever that group's doing, that is sold to them in some way as well, Ricky.
Yeah, I think the other point around that would be people want to know that their information is being held and managed in the right way as well. And that is a very important point in this sector. So we're mindful of all of that. So that's all been taken forward as well.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
You're welcome. Deputy Chair.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for your briefing, Ricky. The variable budget allocations to VSS in 14-15 was obviously quite severe and had a fairly significant impact on victims and survivors, and on the impression victims and survivors have of government provision in relation to their services. Have First Minister, Deputy First Minister, Junior Ministers at any point ever suggested coming to speak to the committee in relation to these issues themselves?
I would have thought that any time there's an invitation from the committee that they would consider that, but I can't answer, for OFMDFM on that. You would need to ask them. Okay. I've no intention, can't imagine the committee has any intention on due interference in a public appointment process at the end of the day. Given the importance placed on timely appointment in relation to the Victims Commissioner, not least by the Victims and Survivors Service, can you give any more outline detail as to why, given there was a pool of appointable people, that an appointment wasn't possible? No.
Okay. Can you give a target date for appointment?
Well, we have launched the new exercise, and the adverts will be in a lot of the major newspapers next week. The advert is actually on a few websites now. So that's the beginning of the process again. So obviously there's a time frame around allowing people to apply. We have to factor in shortlisting and interviews. I think we have interviews scheduled for May. Yes, May. So there you go. Interviews in May.
Okay. You're by that point you're pushing 12-month period of non-appointment of a Victims Commissioner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Chair.
Alex Atwood.
Can we just come back to this issue about the non-appointment? Did the Commissioner for Public Appointments raise any questions about the process?
No.
I think you have to explain to the committee an apparent tension, as I see it, what you said earlier, where you said that there were appointable candidates, and the chair picked up on this. He then said that there needed to be, quote, an appropriate representative voice, unquote. Is an appointable candidate an appropriate representative voice or not?
That's not for me to answer.
It's the language that you use. So I'm asking you about the language that you use.
Okay.
Is an appointable candidate an appropriate representative voice?
Again, it's not for me to answer because I don't make the final decision.
Well, what do you mean by an appropriate representative voice then? Because that's the language that you used.
Yes, someone that will fulfil the role of Commissioner in line with what's been set out in statute for the Commissioner's office in relation to an advocate for victims and survivors, a voice, working with the department, overseeing implementation of the victim strategy. I mean, I don't see an issue with saying the word appropriate person. I don't see a problem with that.
Well, the language that you used was appropriate representative voice, not an appropriate person.
Okay.
You're happy enough in this, right?
Okay.
Thank you for that.
intervention. Like you have to see that it's a curious choice of words, that two people are deemed to be appointable candidates, yet this other criteria appears to have been about an appropriate representative voice.
It's not criteria.
How would you describe it then? It's your language, so you describe it.
I'm merely outlining in the context of filling the role. And again, I don't think it's unreasonable to say that an appropriate voice for victims. I don't understand what the problem is.
Well, I'm trying to clarify what you mean.
Mm-hmm.
If there are two people who are appointable candidates under the criteria for selection, further to a rigorous process of interview, in respect to which the Commissioner for Public Appointments raised no questions, why are they not deemed to be an appropriate representative voice?
But as I've said previously, I don't make the final decision, so I can't answer that.
I'm not saying you should, I'm just saying that you use the language about the appropriate representative voice.
Okay.
Why would you use that language? These people were appointable. They were clearly appropriate representative voices under the criteria for selection interview. Why would you raise any question about it at all?
Well, I mean, I think I'm going over old ground here, Chair. I don't see that there is an issue. Am I missing?
Can I be clear, Ricky? Then you run a process, and
Yes.
it's not. You present a list to the ministers.
That's correct.
The list does not say the person who scored the highest number of marks in our criteria is X, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
It's unranked.
It's unranked. These are the people who passed whatever, jumped whatever bar was set. And then the ministers, as they did in my case, went away on their own, locked themselves in a room, came out and said, run it again. Because even though there were names on that list who were all deemed appointable by the civil servants who ran the process, the ministers, for whatever reason, decided we don't want any of those people, or we don't think they are suitable in our world, and that's beyond your role.
Well, it's beyond my role in terms of what ministers decide, but the pool was not big enough. So that is why we are running the process.
What's the minimum
sizable pool?
What's the minimum size for an?
I don't know.
But how can you say it's not big enough if you don't know what big enough is?
It's not within my gift to make that decision.
All right. So the ministers said there aren't enough names.
Ministers have decided that we should rerun the competition, and those people who were deemed appointable carry forward to this.
But you've talked about the size of the pool.
Yes.
So who decided the pool wasn't big enough?
Ministers have asked me to rerun the competition because the pool was not big enough.
So ministers decided the pool wasn't big enough.
And like I said before, the Commissioner for Public Appointments has not raised any issues.
Alex, sorry, just...
Like, is there not... Like, can I ask this question? You said the words appropriate representative voice. Are they your words or are they not words?
Oh yes, no, I'm not trying to take that back. Yes, I said that, yes. Yes.
But they're your words, you wrote them.
Yeah.
You said them.
I said them, yes. I said it. If I said it, I said it, yes.
So how do you reconcile your words about an appropriate representative voice with the fact that there are two people who are deemed to be appointable?
Well, first of all, I never said there were two people who were deemed to be appointable.
Weren't deemed to be suitable to be appointable?
I never said there were.
I mean, you know, question as a point of order.
Well,
is it fair that somebody who's running a process which is overseen by the Commissioner of Public Appointments,
that's right,
is being put under pressure or his integrity being questioned in terms of putting pressure on the person who is running the process and has now been directed to run another process? Are we not interfering with a process that is in process at this moment in time?
First of all, I'm not sure we have points of order, but I take I'll take your intervention, Jimmy.
It's not a court we're in.
But the second point is I do not sense at any stage that Alex questioned the integrity of Ricky Irwin. Absolutely not.
It's not a court that the officials are sitting in, and I don't see why they should be questioned.
Well, I think if Ricky wishes,
that's okay.
If Ricky wishes to object to the questioning, you may walk out, Jimmy, but it's not a very mature thing to do, in my view. We have to suspend because we're no longer quorate. So, Ricky.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.
Okay, so we are quorate once again, not to make decisions but to take evidence, and Mr. Atwood is in questioning chair.
I'm not going to pursue the point, save to say that for me, appointable candidate, which is a word that you did use, where the Commissioner for Public Appointments does not raise any questions about the process or about the criteria. On the far side of that, the individuals who are appointable are appropriate representative voices because they fulfil the standards of interview and the standards of the criteria. And I don't understand why you made reference to the appropriate representative voice in that context. My second question is, it was decided the pool wasn't big enough. Is that correct? The pool was not a sizable enough pool. Yes. I find that a bit of an odd concept as well, because if the pool was 1, or if it was 21, right, it is adequate because the process was proper. People, the person or persons were appointable. Criteria were fulfilled. And it seems to be a rather arbitrary principle that at the back end of the process, around which there's no issue or dispute, an arbitrary standard is created, namely, the pool's not big enough. So here we have a situation, the process is proper, the outcome sees appointable candidates, and on the far side of that, something that's out with any bit of the process or out with the criteria suddenly is introduced, namely that the pool's not big enough. I think also, subject to correction, because I can't recall this fully, I think the First Minister said on the floor of the Chamber that there was something about the money. We needed to offer more money in order to have a bigger pool, which seems to be similarly seems to me to be a rather strange. You accept that
the introduction of a criteria the pool's not big enough sits uncomfortably with the fact that there was a proper process and that the criteria had been previously fulfilled by at least 2 of the candidates.
It's not criteria.
There's criteria, do you think? I thought
you said that that was additional criteria.
Well, it certainly was an additional standard requirement.
Alex, you recall there was a judicial review of the original 4, which included myself. And I think Justice Gillen concluded that it was reasonable for the then FM and DFM to lock them effectively, figuratively lock themselves in a room without anybody else and reach decisions, which obviously is a process above and beyond the appointment process which Ricky would run, overseen by the Commissioner for Public Appointments. And
they are ministerial appointments.
Judicially, there has been an endorsement of a process that says you run your thing and then we'll add criterion, standards, whatever. No, I'm not saying it's right. I'm just wondering how far further, Ricky can answer these issues.
Okay.
Not trying to censor you. I'm just...
No, I've nothing further. I said I'd only one more question, anyways.
And is that it?
Yep.
Huh? Megan, are you happy enough? Okay. Well,
try again.
Yeah, let's try again.
Okay.
Ricky
thank you.
Patricia, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, unless you want to argue that adjourning the meeting is making a decision, in which case we'll be here forever until the 5th member arrives. I'm adjourning until next Wednesday, 2 p.m. at the Ballymoney Resource Centre in Ballymoney at 2 p.m. Thank you.
Is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.